One of the topics that's often overlooked on small farms is how do you handle all the feed that we give to our pigs. We fill this Osborne feeder with 2,000 pounds of feed, and the 20 plus pigs that are in here will consume this feeder full of feed within 2.5 or 3 weeks. By the time these are adults, they'll go through this much feed in less than a week. We give these pigs access to free choice feed because we want them to grow quickly, we want them to grow healthier, and we want to make sure that they get the minerals that they need to grow rapidly. However, we also give them access to cover crops and many other forage crops. They love grazing different cover crops, root crops, and many other things that we can grow for them. When they're first weaned, they may only eat 75 to 100 pounds of grain a day, but by the time they're market weight, they can easily consume several hundred pounds of grain a day. Most commercial farms will have grain bins with augers that actually automatically feed their pigs. But on our scale, we're not at the point where it's really worth justifying walking out into the field with 300 or 400 pounds of feed per day in 50-pound bags. But at the same time, it's hard for us to justify the infrastructure for grains at this point in our journey. When we bring our pig feed onto our farm, we usually put it in these large bulk containers that have hopper bottoms and a slide gate in the bottom. They're easily lifted with a forklift or with a tractor with pallet forks. We take the feed from that container and put it in the top of this, and that makes it easy for us to drive through the pasture and feed our pigs. But it has not always been that easy. I used to drive a couple hundred miles one way to pick up our feed, but that quickly became a nightmare. At one point, I ordered from a feed mill that had the feed delivered to our farm in these large, they call them super sacks, but they're huge sacks with 4 ears on top. You can slide through forks. They've got an opening in the bottom that you can drain feed from the bottom, and they work really well. The problem is that you need a really high lift to be able to pick them up. Picking those bulk bags up from the ground is not a very efficient way of getting the feed, and more importantly, I can only pick it up about 2 feet off the ground, and in order to get it up that high, I have to turn the forks on my tractor loader upside down, and it's just not a good practice to do. I tried some very foolish ways to empty them before, and I hesitate to even mention how I've done that in the past because it was wildly unsafe. Picking those bags up from the top is not the safest way. I needed to be able to pick the sacks up from the bottom. Let me take you over here and show you what I came up with to help resolve this problem. So if you look carefully, you probably recognize that this is just a 275-gallon IBC tote that I have modified. I took off the top 2 rungs of it and cut off the top. Then I split the sides of the plastic right here and cut holes in the bottom of both the plastic and the stainless steel bottom down there. The inside of these IBC totes that I have are like 40 by 48 inches. The super sacks that my feed comes in are roughly 38 by 38 inches. In theory, what that means is they should fit perfectly inside this container. But from a practical perspective, what happens is even though the containers are 38 by 38, once the feed fills up the sack, it bulges on the outside, and then it has a hard time setting in. That's why I use the plastic sides. I split them so that when the feed sack sits in there, the weight of that feed sack as it slides down is kind of forced into this container. The super sack is put into this container at our local farm supply store. They take a little extra time and load it that way for us, which makes it so much easier. I get to the farm, take it off the trailer with the tractor, bring it over here, and then start unloading it. So this view gives you a little bit of an idea of how this super sack drains. You just untie this knot and pull it out. You can make the larger hole wider and it'll drain faster, but I drain it slower. It's important to kind of stay far back away from this. Again, with this tractor weighing about 7,000 pounds with ballasted wheels, you've got 2,200 pounds up in the air. It's just a really good way for accidents to happen. So we just let this thing drain, and it usually works out quite well. Where things get a little bit tricky is when the tote starts to get closer to being empty, I fast forwarded it, and you can see that I tied that bottom drain off of it. And at this point now, I wrap the loops, top loops of the super sack to the forks of the tractor. Each loop I double wrap around the forks of the tractor, and I put it on the tip, and it keeps it, as it's tilting up right here, it keeps it from sliding down the forks. Of course, there's no way this tractor would pick up this much weight if that super sack were full. It can handle it when there's a 300 or 400 pounds in there, but when it's full, there's no way it's going to. It's also much easier than trying to use our large tractor with a chain around the loops and around the bucket. It works, but we tend to have some spillage, and this is just a much easier system. Let me take a moment to show you how I modify the bins. First, there are two straps across the top of these IBC totes, and you can unscrew them with a Torx 30 bit. Then I pull those straps out and take the tub out. I use this battery-powered jigsaw to cut all the way around the top. And what I found is I want to keep as much overlap on the top as I can to allow those bags to kind of funnel into the bottom of the container. I cut a hole in the bottom of the container, as you can see here. The hole is roughly 16 by 16 inches. I don't get real specific with it. I just want to make sure that I can get that bottom of the super sack to come out. To modify the steel frame, I go on and cut with this angle grinder. I've used 3 or 4 different tools. The outside of this frame here, using the angle grinder works best. You can use a reciprocating saw, but I've found that it jiggles it so much that it's a little bit more hassle than it's worth. Once you start to cut the bottom of the IBC tote here, those cutting discs on the angle grinder just have a hard time going through that bottom strap there, as you can see. So I've actually started using, on the last couple of them, I used this cutting torch. I tried the cutting torch on those upright rods around the outside of the frame, and it's a little bit more of a hassle than it's worth. But cutting right here along the bottom of this pallet, it works well with the torch. It's a little bit slower, but I like how it doesn't leave any jagged edges. That's the thing that I really like. Now, somebody that really knows what they're doing and has a lot of experience with a cutting torch can do it much faster. Then you just put the plastic frame in here, and it's set up and ready to go. You can see the hole in the bottom there. So this is how we modify those IBC totes that we get for free. Our farm supply store puts the super sacks in there for us. We can unload them easier. It's much safer, and it takes a world of a lot less time. Take care and have a great day.